Welcome to another video. So as a property investor myself, and as you may be, or even if you're thinking about buying a property or getting started with buy-to-let or property investment, then like myself, you're probably keen on what's happening with house prices and what the future holds. Before I dive into the video, I'd be really appreciative if you could hit that thumbs up button, as it would really help a small channel like mine, and it also gives me more opportunities to provide you guys with great content. So in this video, it's a really interesting one today actually, because the guy that correctly predicted the 1990 crash and the 2008 crash has now predicted that the property market will continue to boom until 2026. Then it'll be hit hard and we'll see another crash. So according to Fred Harrison, he already predicted the 2008 crash a decade before it actually happened. So will he be correct again? Well, the way things are going, you wouldn't be surprised, would you? I mean, house prices are absolutely booming at the minute, and I have done a couple of videos about this already and why this is happening. But why 2026? Well, Harrison has identified something called the 18-year cycle that's mapped out from hundreds of years worth of data. And there are actually plenty of videos about this on YouTube, and it's definitely an interesting subject to look up. Back in the 1930s, an 18-year business cycle was identified for trends in the city of Chicago, explains Harrison. So basically, it rested on the theory of the price of land over a 14-year period. Now Harrison then quoted, "I checked the theory against US-wide evidence for the 19th century and cross-checked the theory against the diverse cultural and geographic evidence from Japan and Australia over the 20th century. And I identified the cycle as operating within the UK for at least 300 years. Now, although the property cycle is not an exact timeline, according to Harrison, it's made up of two main phases. So, after a crash happens, the market will take around 4 years to restart its upward trajectory again. Yeah, we saw this happening after 2008. It then begins a 6 or 7 year modest growth in what's known as the recovery phase. Next is what's called the mid-cycle dip. Now this is usually a 1 or 2 year downturn in the market, which is then followed up by a boom. Now the final boom usually lasts around 6 or 7 years, and it's during this time where the majority of the price increase happens compared to all the other phases. So in this 6 or 7 year boom, prices rocket up far quicker and far more than any other phase in the cycle. And that is apparently the phase that we're entering right now. Yes, according to Harrison, this is where we're at right now. So we're at the start of this property boom, and there's certainly no denying that it's not already happening, because as you're probably already aware, property prices are skyrocketing at the minute. They are selling like that, and prices just seem to keep going up and up. So Harrison explains that there's these two phases within the 18-year cycle. Now there are ups and downs in both sections. However, over time, the general trend is always upwards until it reaches a final peak. So the next question is, what effect has a pandemic had on this 18-year cycle? Well, many people, including myself, have talked about how the pandemic has inflated property prices due to the furlough scheme, stamp duty holiday, interest rates, and I predicted in previous videos that the UK housing market is likely to crash, or the bubble will burst probably the end of 2021 or within 1 or 2 years after. So maybe in 2022 or 2023. However, this doesn't quite fit with Harrison's 18-year property cycle theory. So my theory, why I think it could crash before this 18-year cycle, which if Harrison is correct will be in 2026. If I'm correct, it'll probably be a little bit sooner. Because I personally think that the pandemic has caused a surge in property prices, which have been accelerated by unforeseen circumstances. So basically, what this means is the 18-year cycle has been speeded up, so to say. Now, I may be completely wrong, but it'll certainly be interesting to see if Harrison's theory stays true and the crash does happen in 2026, or if the effects of the global pandemic will scupper it. Harrison is adamant that this crash will happen in 5 years' time. In between now and then, the market will continue to boom. Now, here's a really interesting quote that he used. The overall trend from here is up and up, squeezing people's purchasing power till the music stops in 2026. Now, I suppose that's a pretty good way of looking at it, because if you haven't already noticed, we are being squeezed. Our finances are being squeezed, obviously not just through house prices, but other economic effects too. And there's only so much squeezing that can happen before things go tits up, so to say. So as a property investor, if this is true and Harrison is right again, then now is the time to buy. Now, for me personally, I found it really difficult to buy property this year, and I've even contemplated just leaving my buy-to-let portfolio for at least a year or two until prices come down. However, looking at this theory, there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that this is actually the start of a boom and not the end of the boom. So if this is the case, then we really should be buying property right now. So what will cause the crash? Now, there's no denying that house prices look expensive based on people's incomes. The average house in the UK currently costs on average around 8 times the average earnings. Now, this 8 times earnings ratio has only ever been breached twice in the last 120 years. Once just prior to the start of the financial crisis, and the second time was just before the 2008 crash. So what could happen to stop this crash from happening? Here's another really interesting quote from Harrison, where he actually wrote to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak regarding this matter. I have written to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak to explain the consequences of not stabilising the housing market, but I do not expect the government to take constructive action, and neither would we, would we? After all, this is the government we're talking about. So in short, Harrison believes that nothing will stop the crash from happening, unless dramatic government action is taken to prevent it. Nothing can stop the crash of 2026, other than if prices were limited to long-run affordable levels, but governments refuse to contemplate the prospect, says Harrison. If people are happy with booms and busts, then there doesn't need to be a solution. So, the big question is, will I and should we be buying property right now? Well, my next video is actually going to be about my next buy-to-let investment, and I'm going to discuss my plan for building my portfolio in 2021 and what I believe will happen. But to be honest, if my instincts are correct, then it's probably a wise decision to wait. If Harrison's correct, then you need to be buying property right now, because we're supposedly at the start of another boom. At the end of the day, instead of trying to time the market, if you're always in the market, always buying, then theoretically you should win in the long term, because you're always going to hit busts and you're also going to always hit booms. So over time, everything should average out. And as we know, property prices do increase over the long run. So as long as you're always in the market and always buying, then you shouldn't have any issues. So that's my little bit of wisdom for today. So what do you think? Please leave your comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button, as it will really help a small channel like mine to grow. And I'll catch you next time, and don't forget that next video about my plans for 2021 and what investment property I'm going to be purchasing.